My name is Julie. I am with the Writing, Reading, and Speech Assistance area of the Learning Commons, which is all the way back there. And we essentially provide help free to COG students for any aspects in your writing process, reading, specifically comprehension, and any speeches you might be getting for any of your classes. It does not have to be an English class. So today we're going to be going over the writing portion of the Accuplacer test. And just so you know that this is a general information session, the writing portion is pretty grammar heavy. So if there's still a concept that's unfamiliar to you by the end of this session, you know that that's the concept you need extra help with. So we'll give you some additional resources. You're going to go online. I'll write on the board some things that you could Google, some stuff that you could find. Or you'd have to meet one-on-one with someone. Now, just so you know that we are here tomorrow from 10 to 2 to meet one-on-one with a coach. You could do that online or in person. We have a few openings left. So if you really feel like you want to get in, you'd want to try to make that appointment. Otherwise, we are not here next week. So if you're looking to get some extra help prior to that fall semester where you could take that test, we would not be available next week, just so you are aware of that. But during the regular fall semester, this is the Writing, Reading, and Speech Assistance regular hours. We are here and available for you 7 days a week. You're able to make an appointment either by calling, going online, or you can also do a walk-in service as well. And you have the capability of having it done in person or online appointments as well. Here's some handouts for you, and if you could just sign in, please.
You said that one-on-one session is from 10 to 2 already.
Yes, 10 to 2. We still have a few openings. We're already starting to book up, so just so you know when you take a look at it, you'll see that. But we do still have a couple. Okay, so before you take the test, we really want you to consider taking the reading and the writing test on completely different days, okay? You're here for the writing. Has anyone taken the reading yet? Okay. All right, great. So your brain works different. The reading is totally different than the writing. The reading is you're reading paragraphs, right? Here you're dealing with sentences and you're dealing with grammar and punctuation, so it's totally different. So that's why it would help to take them on different days. You don't want your brain to get overloaded. Remember, you will need a photo ID and your COD student ID number in order to have the testing center administer that test to you. Allow extra time. Essentially, it's a walk-in service, right? So you know what works best for your own schedule. We say to allow at least an hour for the test. Thank you very much. But, give yourself plenty of time, not just that hour. If you're going to be running to work, you don't want that to affect how long you'll have to take the test. Now, they're not going to they're not going to supply it to you. You want to make sure to ask them for scratch paper and a pencil, okay? They don't allow you to take anything in. But if you ask them for that paper and pencil, they will give it to you. So that's why I've given you a blue sheet paper. Here's one for you if you need it. Okay? Here. Thank you. We'll go over some strategies on how the scratch paper will help you. You will have to just hand in the scratch paper at the end of the session. And then you're going to want to take a look at the COD testing center for the hours and locations. You can take it either at the main campus here or one of our satellite campuses, but just be aware that they do have different hours, and they will stop administering the test an hour prior to closing. So make sure based on the timing that you give yourself plenty of time, okay? I did look myself and I saw that they are open throughout this week, including this Saturday, 8:30 to 2. So they still do have hours available. And again, it's a walk-in. So the purpose of the writing test itself is it wants to determine If you understand sentence structure, essentially you know what makes a sentence complete. You identify the logic of a sentence based on the correct punctuation and grammar. And that you see the relationship between one sentence and another, and essentially that you're able to change a part of that sentence without losing its meaning. And I'll show you how this comes into play with one of the types of questions. So today, we're going to go over some specific facts about the writing test, question types, some strategies you could use, some review. We'll definitely show you some sample questions that are very similar to the questions you'll see on the exam. And then we'll give you some practice information or some additional resources that you can do at home to better prep yourself. Now, facts about the test. If you have not taken the reading test yet, this is applied to both the reading and the writing. Both tests have the same things in common. It's web-based. You go into the testing center, you go onto a computer. It's untimed, thank goodness. We all have testing anxiety, and timing, watching a clock is just one thing that adds to testing anxiety. We don't have to, yeah, exactly. We don't have to worry about that here. Really use that to your advantage, okay? You get your score results immediately. So some of you, when you did take the reading test, it gave you a score, and then the testing center specialist would tell you, hey, you need this score to get into this class, right? It's computer adaptive. That means two different things. It means your test is going to be completely different than your test and changes. And it also means that it adapts to the level of comprehension that you have on the test. Best way for me to explain that is if it feels like it's getting tougher, that's actually a really good sign. It means you're doing well, okay? I was really conscious when I took it of, oh, these questions seem to be getting harder. Oh, and now they're getting easier. Now they're getting harder. That just had to do with what level of comprehension I had. 20 questions total, multiple choice format. Now, I have heard from some students that they had like 23 questions. Okay, so it's around that. Did you have 23? So it seems like 23 has been sort of the average. It by no means goes over.
And that's the both writing and reading?
Yeah, okay. Multiple choice and process of elimination works really well for this test. So we'll take a look at some strategies on how we could use that to our advantage. Okay. There's two types of questions, two main types. The first has to do with sentence correction. These are the directions exactly as they're stated on the test. Select the best version of the underlined part of the sentence. The first choice is the same as the original. If you think the original is best, choose that. This always gets tricky. When I take a test, I feel like I have to change things, like always, right? So just keep in mind that, well, it might be correct, and then you would choose A as your answer, okay? So let's take a look at what this means. So essentially we have two sentences. You might have one or two sentences. An underlined portion of the sentence. Now you have to determine if there's something wrong with that underlined part, and what's wrong, how do we change it? I caution you though, make sure you read the sentences in their entire state, because even though we're looking at the underlined portion, there might be something previous that lends us to find the answer, and I'll show you an example of that later on. So here's my sentences. She hoped to find a new job, one that would let her earn money during the school year. Here's my choices. Again, the first one is always what it was originally. So that's if you determined that it's correct. The next one, she hoped to find a new job, the kind that would let her earn money during the school year. She hoped to find a new job, one that would let her earn money during the school year. She hoped to find a new job so that it would let her earn money during the school year. Are there any you feel you could eliminate right away?
Top two.
Great, good, because we would be creating fragments, okay? Now, if you weren't able to recognize that, then maybe you Google fragments and you find out what makes a sentence a fragment. and gives you some other examples, right? So automatically, now we're looking at C and D. Now, I'm going to tell you, grammatically, both are correct. For this test, you want to choose the answer that's as close to the original as possible without changing its meaning. Okay? So therefore, which one would it be?
C.
Great. Okay?
So
D
why not
is
D?
correct. It's correct. But the point here is it's trying to show you need a comma.
Okay.
That's it. We didn't have to add in all these other words. We were able to just add a comma and make it correct.
Oh, so you just wanted to just make it Accuplacer.
Yeah, and that's the great thing about this test too, is you work with the grammar rule, but it doesn't really like double up on rules. Okay, here is you just need a comma. That's it. It's not going to say like, hey, let's look at comma and modifying phrases or and conjunctions or things like that. It's just here looking at the comma. You just have to determine what rule is it talking about. Here's the second type of question, and I will say that this is the harder question, the harder type, I think. Rewrite the sentence in your head. Well, you don't have to rewrite it in your head. You got that scratch paper, so you can rewrite it on that. Following the directions given below. Keep in mind that your new sentence should be well written and should have essentially the same meaning as the original sentence. In other words, don't like eliminate something or don't completely change its meaning, okay? So here's what that type of question will look like. It will give you an original sentence, and then it'll say to you, rewrite it, okay? Starting with this. This is where it gets tricky because you kind of got to put it together like a puzzle. But it's untimed, so use your scratch paper. I am a very, very visual learner. I would have to see all of these written out in order for me to visually see which one makes the most sense. Just depends on the type of learner you are. So, she was often interviewed, and notice it doesn't finish the sentence, so then you have to go back to the original. She was often interviewed on account of she was a female jockey. She was often interviewed by her being a female jockey. She was often interviewed because she was a female jockey. Or she was often interviewed being as she was a female jockey. What do we think?
Keep it the same, right?
Right, yeah. In this case, it's not like where you have one option that is keeping it the same. So what do we think?
C.
Great, good, C. It's the most succinct, makes the most sense. Okay? I'll show you where those get even trickier. Okay, so we're going to look at sentence structure first. Okay? Now, essentially, the test kind of tries to go over lots of different rules for you. So we're going to go over some of these rules. One is sentence structure. So here is type 1, where we have a sentence, an underlined portion, and we have to determine how to fix it. I have seen that movie. It is not one of my favorites. Okay? Now, the rule states you need to use a semicolon to join two complete sentences that don't have what's called a little conjunction, sometimes called a coordinating conjunction, or sometimes called a fanboy. Have you ever heard fanboys?
Yeah.
Okay, so fanboys are just kind of the fancy acronym. And if you haven't heard of fanboys before, definitely write down on your sheet, fanboys, and write down that this is what it stands for. The F is for, the A is and, because a lot of these questions deal with the fanboy rule. Okay? So the rule for fanboys is that whenever you use one, it always needs a comma before it. Always. Now, if you see a sentence with a comma, read the part before the comma, read the part after the comma. Ask yourself, can they stand alone? So I have seen that movie. That could stand on its own, right? It's a sentence. It is not one of my favorites. Could stand on its own. It's a sentence. We cannot use a comma to connect two sentences, unless we had a fanboy, okay? But what we can use is a semicolon. We could also use a period, but that's not really connecting them or combining them. The semicolon is what does that, okay? So here are our choices. Here, the first one is the original. Here, we have the semicolon. Here, we have a semicolon and a fanboy. And here, we have a fanboy but no comma. What does it have to be? Good. Okay? We're just going by the rule here. The rule will not let you down. What's just important is that you remember the rule. This is just remember that fanboy rule. Do you have a question? Yeah, go for it.
So, like, how would you know if it's like two pieces sentences, if it's a phrase like that?
You're going to want to look for the subject and the verb. Okay? So, my verb is have seen. That's the action of seeing. Look before it. The subject is the doer of the action. So, who did the seeing? I. Okay? Is my verb. It is the subject. Okay? That's the sort of the starting point to figure out, yeah, they could stand on their own. Okay? Okay, so here's another example. The children were excited and they ran into the gym screaming. Now, here's my comma. Let's read what came before. The children were excited. Were, my verb, children, my doer. Okay? Could stand on its own. It makes sense. They ran into the gym screaming. Does it make sense? Action of running. Who did the running? They. Okay? Remember, the rule is to use a comma with one of those fanboys to join them together. Okay? Therefore, what would my answer be? Yeah?
Not changed.
In that case, it was correct to begin with. Okay? Don't let that fool you. Don't think like, oh, well, I got to change something, right? Just go with the rule. If you go with the rule, it can't let you down.
Oh, that is so simple.
Okay, so here is an introductory phrase. You always want to use a comma after the introductory phrase. Now, how do you find an introductory phrase? Remember, a sentence is subject-verb, right? What is the main verb in this sentence? Keep going. Horizon's a noun. What's an action? Set. Good job, set. Okay. Now, it's not going to be dipping because you're not going to like start with an ing type of verb. Okay. So set. That's my main verb. What set? Sun. Subject verb. The actual sentence is the sunset. That's it. That makes sense on its own. Dipping below the horizon is just extra stuff. It's just extra information to describe the sun and its setting. Okay? So, we need to separate that introductory phrase from the main clause or the main phrase with a comma. So now I'm going to read these aloud. Remember, commas also present a natural pause. Okay? Dipping below the horizon, the sunset. 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 Okay? Sometimes you could go with sound. I mean, you're sitting there and you can't say it out loud. But sometimes you could go with that, especially with commas. Unfortunately, with the English language, you can't go with sound with everything. But just know that, this is not, that's not necessary. This would be like dipping is describing below the horizon, and that's not true. Okay? Okay, so now this has to do with parallelism. Have you ever heard that term before? Parallelism?
Yeah, never.
Okay. That would be another thing that if you still need help with that, just Google parallelism. You'll get lots of good information and lots of good suggestions, okay?
So it's parallel, that means like identical.
Yeah, like balanced is what essentially we're talking about. So we've got parallelism. And then we also had discussed fragments earlier. And essentially if you Google fragments, you could also look at run-ons. And you could look at the term comma slice. Now, it's completely not imperative for you to know what the heck a comma slice means for this test. The reason why I put it on the board, though, is just if you wanted to Google and find out some more information and more examples. Okay, so for this, you would look up parallelism. Did I spell that right? Yeah. Okay. So what parallelism means is if you have a list of items in a sentence, you want that list to be alike and balanced in like all aspects, like all parts of speech. Okay. The best way for me to give you an additional example is, have you written a resume yet? Okay, so for some of you who've written a resume, or you will be writing a resume, you have your bullet points, right? Now your bullet points should start with a verb. Okay? If it's a current job you're in, the verb is in present tense. If it's a job you've had in the past, it's in past tense, right? Well, you'd want to make sure that they're all in present tense. But not only that they're all in present tense, that they're all verbs. You wouldn't want to start with acted as a liaison, and then the next one is I had knowledge in. Because I isn't a verb. That's what parallelism is. You want everything to be alike or balanced. Okay? So in whatever part of speech you're talking about. In this case, we're looking at verbs. Now this is a good example of why you have to look at the sentence in its entirety. Even though we have this underlined portion, we have to look before it to find out what the correct answer would be. Okay? Grandma put on the rented ice skates, holding onto the rail, stood up, and went skating away like a pro. Now, it's not really important that you remember like progressive and perfect tense. Do you remember any of those? I took 6.5 years of French, and I felt like it was just never-ending tenses always. And I still don't have them all down, right? It's not important that you know that, but what it is important is that you recognize, okay, well, I've got a verb here, and then I've got an ing verb, and then I have a verb, and then I have a verb ing verb. There's something off there, okay? Now, here's the underlined portion, but what's actually going to dictate the tense that this sentence should use is before the underlined portion with the very first verb. Our very first verb is put, and that's the past tense. So we need to make sure that all of them are in the simple past tense. So, first one is the original. Second one, holding onto the rail, stood up and skated. We're getting closer because we've made stood up, skated. Those are past, but we still have the ing. Holding onto the rail, was standing up, and went skating. Okay, so we've got verb ing, But this first one just has ing. It doesn't have verb ing. Okay? Held onto the rail, stood up, skated. Yeah, right? Okay? But that was determined by put, which was not underlined. So, don't let the underlined portion sort of trick you into thinking that that's where the answer lies. You really have to look at the sentence in its entirety. Okay. So now we go to agreement. Here's our example. Every car, truck, and motorcycle on the road must display their inspection sticker on the windshield. Now the rule is that pronouns have to agree with their partners. Okay? I'm going to put a fancy word up on the board. Just something that you could Google. Antecedent pronoun agreement. Again, it's not important that you remember antecedent. If after this prep you just antecedent gets out of your head, it's fine. This is just for you to get more examples, more help, okay? All antecedent means is it's the noun that the pronoun is referring to. We first use a noun, and then we could use a pronoun to replace that noun. But they have to agree in number. So if I said, the boy flew his kite and he had a great time. Sorry, I'm not as creative today. I'm using he because it's one boy. If I said the boys flew their kites, boys is plural, so I have to use their. Okay? So you just have to determine is your noun singular or plural, and then your pronoun will change based on what it is. Okay? Now, having said that, this one gets kind of tricky. Which can I eliminate right away? I could definitely get rid of B. That means over there. What else? Yes, this is the contraction, meaning it is. Okay? So now, all I have to determine is my noun singular or plural? We would think so, wouldn't we? Okay? Because we have car, truck, motorcycle. We have three things, right? We think that they're plural. It's only one. The reason why they're only one is because we use this word every. Okay? Now, there's lots of different rules like this. Look up antecedent pronoun agreement. I will tell you though, I didn't feel like the test got really tricky with what these rules were. One way to look at it is because we use the word every, we have made car, truck, motorcycle without an S at the end, right? So therefore they would have to be singular. If I said all, then I'd say all cars, trucks, and motorcycles, then it would be plural, and I would use there. Okay? So that was a little bit tricky, but again, just look at what you have. You don't have any S there, so. Here's another one that has to do with verb tense. During the movie, Sam stood up and spills his popcorn all over the floor. Well, stood up is past, spills is present, right? That doesn't make sense. So which one would it be? Stood up, spilled. Okay? They all have to be the same. Past, past. Okay. This has to do with modifying phrases similar to the dipping below the horizon. Okay? Cars were splashing my shoes as I waited for the bus in the rain. It wants you to rewrite the sentence, beginning with waiting for the bus in the rain. Now, the rule is to place subjects immediately after the introductory modifying phrase. What that means is when you have a phrase like this, the first word has to be the thing that's doing that action, or the thing it's talking about, okay? So, who was waiting for the bus in the rain? Were cars waiting?
No.
Was mud waiting?
No.
Were my shoes and pants waiting?
I mean, technically.
They're like, hey, what's going on, right? Was I waiting?
Yeah.
I didn't even read that. I shouldn't advocate to not read the rest of it. But for this one, that made sense because there was only one choice. We'll take a look at where it's not only one choice, and then, of course, you do have to read the whole thing. Mike was late. The reason being that he had forgotten to set his alarm clock the night before. Essentially, this just has to do with stating ideas clearly. It has to do with wordiness. Say the same thing, but just in a succinct manner. So here's the first one. Mike was late. The reason was he forgot to set his alarm clock. Mike was late because he forgot to set his alarm clock. Or Mike was late because his alarm clock was forgotten to be set. What do we think? Which one is saying the idea, but in the clearest way possible?
C.
Good. D is passive voice, and this is that's a comma slice, okay? And then that is very, very wordy.
What were you trying to figure out? I got this.
Which one is stating it in the clearest way possible, okay? And there are a few like that. Now, what's tricky again is on the test, it doesn't say to you, oh, here, take a look at word choice. Here, take a look at modifying phrases. That's what you have to figure out, okay? So you would read this, take a look at what your choices are, and see, well, is it changing pronouns around? Is it changing with, punctuation? What is it doing here? Okay, so do you have any questions before we get into some practice? Good so far? Okay. And again, if one of these concepts is still unfamiliar to you, try to Google it. I'll show you some additional resources, or that's just where you know you need more time on one area than the other. Okay, so this is the first type of question. Now remember there's those two types. One where it's that underlined portion, and then one where it gives you a sentence and it wants you to rewrite it. Now they're all sort of jumbled. I mean, I wouldn't say it's like 10 of one and 10 of the other, okay? So, we look at the underlined portion, but remember you want to look at the whole thing. Mockingbirds have no song of their own, but it can imitate up to 100 other bird calls. Now, does anything sound weird? Yeah, it, right? Why does it sound weird?
Mockingbirds are plural.
Very good, okay? So we were already able to determine what it is we have to change. We're not talking about commas here. We're talking about pronoun reference. The pronoun has to agree with the partner, which is mockingbirds. So that's the first one. Mockingbirds have no song of their own, however, it could be intimidating to up to 100 other bird calls. Mockingbirds have no song of their own, yet they could imitate up to 100 other bird calls. Mockingbirds have no song of their own, but they can imitate up to 100 other bird calls. Which ones can we eliminate? Good. A and B. Get rid of the ones that have it. Okay? C and D, both of them grammatically correct.
Would it be D?
B. Good. As close to the original as possible.
Oh, it's the fanboys I got me. Sorry.
Oh, these are both fanboys. Okay? And it kept the comma, so that's good. But in this one, it changed it to could. There's no need for it. We're not looking at like verb tense here. We were looking at pronoun reference. Okay? The committee members took a long lunch break to tour the city. The committee members reconvened. Now, even though this is the underlined portion, remember if you have a comma, read the thing that comes before it, read the thing that comes after it. If they can both stand on their own as complete sentences, you are using a comma incorrectly. Okay? So that's actually what's going on here in the sentence. That's not what's underlined, but that's what's going on here. Let's see how it changes it. So here's the original. After taking a long lunch break to tour the city, the committee members reconvened. While the committee members took a long lunch break to tour the city, the committee members reconvened. Although taking a long lunch break to tour the city, the committee members reconvened. Good. Essentially what it did is it made it an introductory modifying phrase. Okay? And with that comma, and then this is our actual sentence, our complete sentence. Okay? Now, here are those tricky ones. Think about how you rewrite the sentence, and then choose the best answer. Make sure to keep it so that you're not changing the meaning. Okay? And again, I find these tricky just because I'm really, really visual, and it's not finishing the sentence for me. So I'm going to reread it as it would be. Slapstick is a brand of comedy relying on horseplay, and it owes its name to 16th century Italian harlequins who slapped each other with sticks in mocking punishment. It wants you to rewrite that sentence, but start with a brand of comedy relying on horseplay. Now, what is a brand of comedy relying on horseplay? Slapstick. So that has to be the next word. Darn, I gotta read them now, right? I'm able to get rid of C, but that's it. All right, so okay, I gotta read. A brand of comedy relying on horseplay. Slapstick owing its name to 16th century Italian harlequins who slapped each other with sticks in mocking punishment. A brand of comedy relying on horseplay, slapstick, which owes its name to 16th century Italian harlequins who slapped each other with sticks in mocking punishment. Or, a brand of comedy relying on horseplay, slapstick owes its name to 16th century Italian harlequins who slapped each other with sticks in mocking punishment. Okay, good instincts, okay? Whenever we use which or like that in the middle of a sentence, we're needing additional information after it, okay? In this case, the only additional information we have is actually about Italian harlequins, not about slapstick. So if I continued on and gave you additional information, then this would work, okay? But the answer would be slapstick owes. Subject, verb. Okay? So you can see these are tricky. I really recommend you write these out. Fred Astaire, often considered the stage's most gifted dancing star, appeared in 11 Broadway musicals between 1917 and 1932. Rewrite it. Often considered the stage's most gifted dancing star. What has to be the next word? Fred Astaire. We only have one choice.
Wait, what?
I didn't have to read. Okay? So whenever we have an introductory modifying phrase, the word that comes directly after it has to be the person or thing that this is modifying. So you would ask yourself, who is often considered the stage's most gifted dancing star? Is it Fred Astaire? Is it and? Is it he, which I'll get back to? Or is it and? Okay? Well, why could it not be exactly? Okay?
He's just this one.
It's just him, right? If we had a sentence that came before, and we said Fred Astaire, then we could use the pronoun he, but in this case, that's not the case.
It's just not who
Yeah, that's how great he was, right? Okay, now this one I always read wrong, so bear with me, and it'll take me some time. Because cotton produced soil exhaustion, George Washington Carver urged the planting of peanuts and other crops in its place. I would definitely have to write this out on my scratch paper. It wants me to rewrite it like this.
Oh, God.
Yes. George Washington Carver urged the planting
What?
of peanuts and other crops in place of cotton, however it produced soil exhaustion. Did you follow that?
Whoa, wait, pineapples. Why?
I've never heard that before.
That's my safe one.
I like it. All right, so that's where it's really, this is a puzzle. And you're putting the pieces together, okay? You could imagine why it's so much easier to write it out on a piece of paper. The first time I took this test, I didn't really, sort of get much. I just, go take the test before you're going to do the info sessions. And I got to this section, and I was like, huh? It's not finishing the sentence for me. What am I supposed, I don't get it. So you have to sort of finish the sentence, right? So you just kind of follow it, go back to it, see. So it's George Washington Carver urged the planting of peanuts and other crops, and then the in its place is being replaced with in place of cotton. However, cotton produced soil exhaustion. Okay? Yeah. I would say that this is by far the trickiest one I've seen on samples and on the test. But it's good to see that. It's good so that you can see kind of how tricky they could get and how you really do want to go with your visuals. Because remember, now we have to apply a rule to it. Okay? So, well, let's take a look at all of them, and I'll explain why it's the one it is. George Washington Carver urged the planting of peanuts and other crops in place of cotton, although it produced soil exhaustion. George Washington Carver urged the planting of peanuts and other crops in place of cotton, and it produced soil exhaustion. George Washington Carver urged the planting of peanuts and other crops in place of cotton, which produced soil exhaustion. Does anyone think they know the answer? Okay, so you're going with B. Anyone else? Okay, A. Okay. No, not going to try, right? Okay, so let's go with some rules. Okay, because that's what we have to go on. They're all saying the same thing, but using a different word after the comma. Okay? Now, whenever we have the word however, it's a different type of conjunction. It's not one of our fanboys where we could just use a comma. Okay? In fact, whenever we use however, we would have to use semicolon, however, comma, or period, however, comma. Or, I'm sorry, yeah. Period, however, comma, semicolon, however, comma. It's not a fanboy.
If you were to use a comma for a, we had to make that a capital. No, put a period after comma and then semicolon after however.
Yes, if you did period, however, comma, yes, you would need to capitalize however.
Okay.
If you did semicolon, it actually depends. Sometimes you could just leave it lowercase.
That's wrong automatically.
That's wrong automatically because it's using a comma with a conjunction that's not a fanboy. That's the best way to look at it. It's not a fanboy. Okay? And you could always look up conjunctions. There's different conjunctions. There's coordinating, subordinating, and correlative. You don't have to know that. But there's different rules for different conjunctions. So, essentially for this, it's not a fanboy. So I can't just use a comma. It wouldn't be using it appropriately. If I said be, I'm using the word although. Although is creating a contrast. Okay? So it would be suggesting that, well, even though cotton produced soil exhaustion, Carver still went with peanuts and other crops. That's not actually the meaning of the sentence. The meaning of the sentence is that he went with peanuts and other crops because cotton produced soil exhaustion. he needed something that didn't produce oil exhaustion, so he went with peanuts and other crops. If you use C, I've got comma fanboy, so grammatically that's correct. But whenever we use and, it's setting up like a new idea. So he urged the planting of peanuts. Oh, and by the way, can't produce soil exhaustion.
They're not related.
They're not related. Okay? This one is the only one that's relating to why Carver decided to urge the planting of peanuts and other crops. The reason is because he needed them to take place of cotton, which was producing that soil exhaustion. Okay? So that's why this one's tricky, because we got to read it, put the puzzle pieces together right, go with the grammar rules, and then also go with the meaning. Okay? Again, I would say that this is the toughest, so don't let that deter you.
I'll see this on our college.
Julie, you said that it would have happened.
What is this?
Okay. So, if you take a look at your sheet, there's some really, really great additional resources that are available to you online. You could do it at your leisure, at home. If you look at the Accuplacer Placement Test Review Guide, there's going to be a PDF that's available to you. It'll have sample questions that are very similar to what you'll see on the test. This was made by the company who made the test. And then it'll also give you what the answers are at the end. Union Test Prep, I personally like this. I'm the one who chose that resource because I'm a visual learner and I work off of short-term memory. So I like how there's the idea of being able to create flashcards, but it also does practice tests and it'll give you the answer. Then here's some additional PDFs. There's also an app actually, by the way. You can check out some stuff on YouTube, but a really invaluable resource is the Learning Express library. And this is through your library. So if you have a library card, you would go to the library webpage, you would go to databases, and it's listed under L, and it's called Learning Express Library, I think 3.0 is the version. You log in with your username and password, which I believe is your My Access, or you might have to set up an account. And then you go to, I believe it's College Test Prep. They've got tons of resources on there for you, and it has information on, what you got wrong and why you got it wrong. So I really, really urge you to use these resources prior to taking that test, and just don't go in until you feel really comfortable and confident doing so. Okay? And then this is just so that you see what the Writing, Reading, and Speech Assistance webpage looks like. You could go here to schedule a face-to-face appointment, and then we also have online appointments that are available throughout the year for you as well. Essentially, it's a one-on-one where you're working with a coach, and again, we go over any aspect of writing, reading, and speech in any of your class areas. So guys, thank you so much. Good luck. If you could please do me a big favor and fill out that evaluation form. Does everyone have one of those? Oh yeah, okay. Yeah, I know, it's kind of confusing. Just on the bottom. And that would be really helpful. And good luck to you. I wish you the best. The 10th.
So I have a question.
Yes.
I took the other class, or what is it?
The reading.
No, the other one. The writing, what is it, the other company? Compass, was it?
Yeah, so you do have to take this.
Okay, so
This is what's replacing the Compass exam.
so there's no like an essay like the other one?
No.
No? That was hard.
I know, right? Yes. I would say that this is an improvement on the Compass. The only downside is with the Compass, you had a third attempt option to take it 3 times, and this you can take only twice a year. Okay?
If she took it recently, does it still count, the compass?
No.
No.
That's what I've heard, that you'd have to take this to replace it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Good luck. Uh-huh. Okay. 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 Yeah. Thank you. Oh, that's okay. That's okay.
Thank you.
Do you know which one recently was it that? Okay.
The one that in the school.
Oh, okay. So yeah, so the compass wouldn't apply. Correct. Right. So this is replacing the compass. So anyone who's taking the compass has to take the Accuplacer now. If you have taken the Accuplacer within the past year, I believe that score is what would count. You of course have the option of retaking to see if you place higher. You might think, sorry. Oh, that's okay. Everyone's doing that. You might want to ask your academic counselor, or maybe the testing center. The only reason I say that is because we've been saying, hey, this is your fifth year.
Right.
But then we were told, oh wait, that might not be true. So I would just like try and get some clarification, because I hate to have you like think, oh no, I'm good, I took it, 6 months ago or whatever, and then they're gonna tell me how you got everything.
Very cool. What is
Thank
the
you.
session you said about? Yes, next tomorrow. What is that?
Tomorrow is, if you needed more help, we are open in the back for one-on-one coaching. So that's, yeah, that was it.
So it's like, but like the practice, whatever you put in.
Yeah, so
That will be good, right? I don't think
for, like, if you came into practice,
I.
Yes.
Is it almost the same thing as if I go online, just.
kinda,
Yeah.
yeah, just kind of more. Like, what some students are doing is they're going online, doing some of that additional resource stuff, and then they're coming and saying, gosh, I did these practice, and like, I'm still confused about parallelism. And then we talk about just parallelism, or just like where a comma goes, things like that. But yeah, the online stuff, it is really, really great, very similar to the test.
I was just like, I didn't even know that you guys changed that.
Yeah, just this past spring
Because
semester.
I failed the other one, and I was really like, I took all my reading classes, like what I could take from like reading, and then I was stuck there. I'm like, okay, so what am I gonna do? This writing thing is just so hard.
Yes.
I never attended to the session or anything,
Yeah, yeah.
so I had no idea you
Yeah.
guys had changed the whole math.
Yeah.
and
I know,
everything.
just last semester. And it's just like a standardized, like what's being done across the board. But like just personally, and it could just be the type of learner I am, I've taken both the Compass and the Accuplacer. And, they're both hard because they're placement tests, but I liked the Accuplacer better. Because it kind of seemed more straightforward than the Compass. The Compass to me was kind of confusing. So, but if that helps.
I don't know if you can answer this question, but I was looking at this placement test, and you guys have like geometry?
Yes.
We have to take that? I'm confused.
That I don't know, to be honest with you. I know nothing about math. I stay away from math.
Yeah, because
I
I
don't
understand
know.
why is there this? Do we need to take both?
It sounds like it. The way it's listing it is to prepare for the geometry placement test. But why would you have to take this?
So what is the math? Like, it doesn't have geometry?
The math, I believe, is
Just algebra.
algebra. Now, unfortunately, the math section of the Learning Commons Act is closed, yeah.
Yeah, it's so like small.
You know who might know that, though, is the testing center might know. Otherwise, have you met with your academic counselor?
No.
Even if you don't have time to make an appointment, you could call like academic advising, and they should definitely be able to answer that for you.
Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Oh, boy.
Gosh.
All right, thank you.
Good luck.
Bye. Thank you.